talked about it in letters, and we talked about it on the phone. But how you really feel about it, I don't really know.
What's your take on Cassavetes? 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 Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on...
Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave. This week, it's the Hollywood Studios Year by Year, RKO 1933.
So we've got two films that don't have much of an obvious connection other than being, I think, probably on the prestige end of RKO's productions. We've got one starring, well, Our Betters, directed by Cukor and produced by Selznick during his brief and important tenure at RKO. And of course, they often work together. So that's Our Betters, and it's starring one of the very hottest female stars in Hollywood at the time, Constance Bennett.
Best known today, really, as the older sister of Joan Bennett, who's had, I guess, more staying power with film aficionados because she worked with all kinds of auteurs in the 40s. But
Yeah, and did a lot of work in noir. And
they're both great.
And then we have Morning Glory, starring an up-and-coming, well, I guess she came with this movie, RKO star Katharine Hepburn.
A Selznick discovery, or whatever you want
He
to call
hired
it.
her anyway. And of course she won her first and for a long time her only Academy Award for this picture. I, however, had never seen it before because it isn't discussed much, and I wonder how much of that has to do with the fact that Lowell Sherman, the director, is not an auteur. I thought it was really good. I was surprised. I thought Sherman did a great job, and he even had some arty shots in the film.
He did, and we've seen him before as an actor.
He actually starred with Constance Bennett in a film that probably she is best remembered for now, in addition to Topper, later with Cary Grant, which is the very first A Star is Born, so early that it didn't even have that title yet. What Price Hollywood? Another Cukor Selznick.
Yeah, Lowell Sherman, he was transitioning to being a fairly prominent director, but then he died, unfortunately. It's a shame all around that this movie doesn't get much attention.
Yeah, well, we're going to give it some attention
We are.
for all the good that will do to our, 100 or so listeners.
Shall we begin? Morning Glory.
Before we get into it, maybe we want to look at some more personnel that were involved with the making of this film.
Yes?
Because everybody, all of the actors and the writers and the source material all led in some delightfully interesting directions this week. Keeping in mind that I 90% am going by Wikipedia, so there could be errors.
A dense web of associations.
So we've got a screenplay attributed to Howard J. Green, who surprised me a lot to realize that I knew that name from I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, one of the two screenwriters attributed by that Wikipedia entry.
Are they his two best known credits, or did he keep on going, or is he really only an early 30s figure?
Well,
I don't know anything
he's
about this guy.
Started out as a gag writer, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
Came up through vaudeville, and I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. That was just 2 pictures earlier for him.
Oh, it looks like he's got a really long list of credits as screenwriter into the 50s.
Yep, none that I know of. Nothing else is jumping out of me after these.
I've seen some of those movies, but it's true none of them are all-time classics or anything.
Still, it shows quite a bit of range. The play is by someone with even richer and more extensive Hollywood associations and range. Zoe Akins. She wrote the play The Greeks Had a Word for It, which was adapted multiple times as a film, including most famously as How to Marry a Millionaire in 1953.
A tried and true plot.
She won the Pulitzer Prize for her dramatization of Edith Wharton's The Old Maid, which became the basis for the Bette Davis film.
Betty Davis and Miriam Hopkins.
True. And she also co-wrote the screenplay for Camille.
Oh, yes.
George Cukor's Camille, which is excellent, starring Greta Garbo.
Max Steiner is credited as musical director for both of these films. They're not notable for their music, but this is the beginning of a new era. Max Steiner, his entry into Hollywood marks the ramp up to full symphonic scores that you're going to get very shortly. I mean, he did the score for King Kong. He will move over to Warner Brothers, and that will be his most famous period.
That's interesting that you bring that up, though, because I spent the whole length of our betters thinking about how there is no score. There is no extra diegetic music other than
over the credits.
Yes. I was noticing it, not only because it contrasted with Morning Glory, that has plenty of extra diegetic music, but also because Selznick credits himself with having invented extra diegetic music.
Wall-to-wall score.
Yeah, and there is none of that going on here.
Well, there will be very shortly, and Max Steiner is going to be a key player. In many ways, and I think a lot of people have remarked on this, it does feel like kind of a trial run for Stage Door.
Also for Alice Adams.
Yeah, it's true, both. But Stage Door in the milieu and even in the rough sketch of the relationship.
But she's playing a character far more like Alice Adams.
Yeah, she's much more insecure.
You know, from a small town, inauspicious background.
Right, in Stage
Lower
Door,
economic.
She's a millionaire's kid.
Yes.
So she's got a little bit, that gives you a confidence boost. In both cases, she comes face to face with Adolphe Menjou, and
She likes him better in this movie.
Well, yes. You know, and they may have been counting on people remembering this for Stage Door.
Well, she won the Academy Award.
Exactly. So people might have been in the back of their minds thinking, oh yeah, Katharine Hepburn, she might fall for that evil Menjou again. In Stage Door, she just plays with him. Ginger Rogers is the one that gets a little bit hung up on him.
I have to say that I did not, as much as I like this film, I did not remotely buy either her interest in Adolphe Menjou, although she acts it very well, or Douglas Fairbanks Jr.'s interest in her at all. I saw no chemistry, romantic chemistry between anybody in this movie.
I don't see it that way at all. Now, I don't see why anyone would have a crush on Adolphe Menjou.
Oh, I could understand why. I just didn't feel anything going on between them. There was no chemistry between the actors to me.
Well, I think that works because she is obsessed with an idea of him.
Yes, it all works. It all works. Except maybe me not believing Douglas Fairbanks Jr. is in love with her.
I believe that. I think he does a terrific job, Fairbanks Jr., and that's a pretty thankless role, being ignored for Adolphe Menjou all through the movie.
Very convincing as a playwright.
And he's really young.
Playwright.
I think he's younger than Hepburn at this
me?
time, or all the time, right?
Is he really?
I think he was probably like 24 in this movie.
And they keep talking about her as a kid. So he was born in 1909?
Yeah, so he's 24. He's younger than Hepburn, yeah.
That's hilarious.
He was doing a lot of different things in the early 30s.
And always buckling his swash?
He wasn't doing any of that in the early 30s. You know, like he's Little Caesar's weird best friend in the Robinson film. We've seen a few of his other strange Warner Brothers films. He had to go away to England and come back before he started to get the kinds of roles that you associate with Douglas Fairbanks Jr. He gives it his all in this one. I mean, he has a couple of really tough emotional scenes and he comes through.
We'll just have to differ on our feelings about the chemistry here.
Let's talk about C. Aubrey Smith. What a great role for him. The old British guy who becomes her mentor.
Oh yeah, okay.
Very believable as someone who does not have a creepy interest in her.
Good lord! Look at this photo of him from 1895. The man just looks like a drawing on Wikipedia.
That's kind of what he is known for, right? I mean, he's in his 70s, I think, at this point, and he looks way tougher than me. He just kept on going.
And yet he's playing this genial Shakespeare actor.
In this one he is. He played a lot of different things. We've seen him before in Lubitsch movies, too. He would play stuffy British majors, and he would play this kind of character and everything in between. An elder statesman of Hollywood.
Anyone else you want to single out?
We should definitely talk about the actress that played Rita Vernon, Mary Duncan.
Good lord, she was the city girl.
Oh yeah, I guess so.
F.W. Murnau's City Girl should be better known than it is. But I guess you couldn't see it for a long time or something. We caught a screening at the Review Cinema, their silent cinema series, back when that was a possibility. And it was magnificent.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It's true, I didn't recognize her from that.
It is a companion piece to Sunrise.
She does a terrific job in this film, too, and she's not a likable character, but kind of riveting in her own way.
She is the blonde?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Yeah, no wonder we didn't recognize her. Yeah, she was very good. There's a Peppy in each film.
There is a gigolo named Peppy in both films, so that's a major link. Not played by the same actor. This Peppy is quite minor compared to the Peppy in our betters. And I guess Helen Ware we should mention, who was a stage legend of sorts, and she plays a kind of faded stage legend who is now a dresser.
An extensive filmography, although only during the silent era up to 1935.
Well, she dies.
Oh, well, there you go. She didn't seem that old in the movie. Oh, she died at age 61. That would be why.
Yeah.
Wikipedia says she had a successful Broadway stage career, making her first appearance in 1899 with Maude Adams. So she did not share the fate, obviously, of her character, but she does seem to bring some kind of, I don't know, feeling of authenticity to this role of an ex-Broadway actress.
Exactly. So people watching this at the time, it would have had an extra kind of hunch. And in Stage Door, the kind of analog, which is at once funnier and even sadder in some ways, is the Constance Collier character, who was a big actress playing with Bernhardt, and now she's wandering around that Footlights Club offering lessons to people.
Sure, but she's kind of like a mixture of that and C. Aubrey Smith, who also is reduced to infrequent parts that aren't worthy of him.
They're just not great parts, but he always gets cast, at least. So there's some loyalty by Manjou, at least to C. Aubrey Smith, maybe to nobody else.
Yeah, but there's a little bit of sadness.
Well, yeah,
a dusting of sadness.
He doesn't get lead roles anymore. It used to be his company, now it's not. Now he's part of the company.
So this is all familiar from stage setting movies of this type, and we get, as you say, a lot of it repeated in Stage Door. All of these sad figures of the stage who had their moment and now are having it no more. In fact, that is the entire subject of the film.
Do you have an extra feeling of connection to all of this as a creature of the stage yourself? A former creature of the
Winnipeg
stage?
The Winnipeg, Manitoba stage? Okay, well, I had one play professionally produced that I got to see in Toronto. Not really, because I never got to the point of having enough of a career to even look back on it, but I did identify, and maybe you did too, with the Katharine Hepburn character, who is an autodidact and is extraordinarily passionate and intense about art and wanting to take her place in it. And is she any good at it, or isn't she? Is she going to succeed at this? Is she not? The questions, unfortunately, I'm still asking myself many years later.
I think it's a very powerful performance by Hepburn, and the audience loved her at the time, and it's a problem with the audience if they got tired of her soon after.
So this is how Katharine Hepburn's career went in the 30s. Bill of Divorcement, she is introduced very strong.
Went over big.
Morning Glory, we'll just leave Christopher Strong out of this.
Well, Christopher Strong is one of the greatest movies, but no, I don't think that one went over big at all. Screenplay
by Zoe Akins, that was the other connection.
Right, so that's where it's come up. So we did talk about Christopher Strong in our Dorothy Arzner episode.
Oh, yeah, that was the preview for our film podcast. Morning Glory went over big, Little Women went over big, critics loved her, audiences loved her, then Streak of Failures, 3 of them. She's rescued by Alice Adams, then Streak of Failures, 4 of them, rescued by Stage Door, but that's more attributed to Ginger Rogers' rising popularity. I think Holiday was a success.
No, I don't think.
No, really? No.
Well, I think it did all right, but it certainly didn't help her, and she was gone. It's her last movie before the hiatus, where she went back to Broadway and played in the Philadelphia story.
Yeah, so after her next string of failures, she took matters into her own hands and reinvented her screen persona, basically. But this is what's interesting about it. Early on here, and I don't remember Bill of Divorcement well, we're going to have to do it on one of these passes.
Going to do most of her other 30s films, because I, anyway, am a huge fan, and I'm always pushing to talk about them and watch them. So, yeah, but we should go back and do Bill of Divorcement somehow in a special subject or something.
But certainly films like Morning Glory and Christopher Strong and Alice Adams, she is notable for her extreme vulnerability and playing an oddball. An oddball who is very, very, very fragile.
And potentially very irritating, which we were talking about just last week.
Somehow, faintly, when we were talking about Greta Gerwig and Damsels of Distress of Katharine Hepburn, and then watching this movie made me faintly think about Greta Gerwig. The connection isn't big and obvious, but there's something there. What's interesting is that somehow audiences took from this that she was a flinty, hard snob with no emotions.
Yeah, I don't know how.
And then later on, she actually embraces that, starting with Stage Door, I think, to some extent, and then she always has to be shown to in fact possess emotions, ultimately, until she pairs herself with Spencer Tracy, and then that seems to work, have some kind of down-to-earth balance that the American public needed. But yeah, it's just the reputation that she developed as a screen persona really had nothing to do with these early parts and what she's actually like on the screen.
No, she is extraordinarily painfully vulnerable
Well, that's
in
what's so
most
striking.
of these 30s films. Yeah.
What's so striking about this movie is exactly how painful it becomes. And the whole thing is painful, like right through to the end. So credit to Lowell Sherman.
So should we tell a little bit of the plot so
Sure.
that we can hang things on it? You could almost see it as a thinly veiled version of Katharine Hepburn's life to date, although not really.
Oh no, Katharine Hepburn, the woman, and maybe this is where the reputation came from, was insanely confident. She was like a psycho of confident narcissism.
Was she, though? In the early
She certainly
era,
presented herself that way.
She presented herself that way, but she was...
stomping around in pants and telling everybody off in her strident voice.
Yeah, of course. But she also... Clearly things were getting to her, right? Because right after this, or not long after this, she has her first retreat to Broadway where she tried to learn to act and she was lambasted,
Well,
right?
yeah.
So
Certainly,
she was feeling the slings and arrows.
I don't know if it had already started.
It
Because, she had some success on the stage playing in Amazon. That's how she came to Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
But then after she had some film success and she went back to the stage and, she didn't have a lot of experience and wasn't the greatest trained stage actor. And the critics were hard on her because
Dorothy
of her
Parker,
Hollywood
most notably.
successes. Ran the gamut of emotion from A to B, yes. One of her good lines that Mr. Deeds should give her a sound spanking for.
In this film, we do get A to Z pretty much, I think, from
Well,
Hepburn.
but her film performances were different than the stage. And later when you see her on things like that Dick Cavett interview, that long interview, it might be in there, but a lot of the long interviews she did in her later life, she talks about the many, many times, and I think you're right, I think both before and after she started making pictures that she was aware of just being a complete failure on the stage. But being Katharine Hepburn, she kept at it decade after decade after decade, and the critics often attacked her until she actually became tremendously good as a stage actress, and then brought some of those stage performances, either originated by her or originated by someone else, but brought some major stage performances to film, like The Long Day's Journey into Night.
Yeah.
Which some people give her credit for and some don't, but I am on the side of I can't imagine a better screen performance than that.
It is very good. One of the themes for this week will be the changing of the guard at RKO as they moved from Constance Bennett as, I guess, the face of the studio to Hepburn, at least for a little while, and then they bring in Rogers and Astaire. But Hepburn really is the avatar of RKO in 1933 and even into 1934, although everything was a failure.
Berman kept trying. Berman was like, we don't have, other than Astaire, we don't have anything else.
And in Hollywood, the Golden Years, the RKO story, my favorite documentary, they actually have a fairly lengthy scene with her discussing everything that went on behind the scenes in her preparation for getting Morning Glory. And she says that she walked into Pandro's office. They were preparing this script for Constance Bennett. And she said, "Over my dead body, it goes to Constance Bennett. I want that. It's got to be mine, mine." She said, don't show it to her.
Well,
I want it.
And Constance Bennett...
She's not right for this role anyway.
Well, she had range. I mean, she did What Price Hollywood.
No one could have been as good as
She
this.
certainly wouldn't have brought to it what Hepburn brings to it. In some ways, she would have been better in that all of this stuff where these men seem sexually interested in Hepburn, either in a predatory or non-predatory way, as the case may be, seems a little unbelievable. Although the real life Katharine Hepburn, of course, had absolutely no trouble getting men sexually interested in her.
I don't understand what you're saying. You're saying that she's not good looking? She's very good looking.
Yeah, but not in the way that kind of young, attractive actress is usually portrayed on the screen, which would be more like Constance Bennett.
Yeah, sure. But no, I don't think it's an impediment. And there are scenes in this film that are so upsetting to watch because you're so embarrassed for her.
Could not, that is something only Hepburn can do, and really only at this point in her career, because then later she does start putting on a harder exterior.
After RKO. Because all through RKO, she's got moments like this.
Even in Stage Door.
But that's, because they asked her to do that.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
then, she's deeply affecting when she gives her curtain speech in Stage Door. So the vulnerability is there. It's just, it's being deployed in a different way. And Holiday was her last pre-MGM movie. And that one, she's basically a suicidal mess and really conveys it well. Now, of course, in Bringing Up Baby, It's a little different story, but nobody's being asked to resemble a human in that movie, really. Maybe George.
I was going to say that too. Maybe George the dog. That's it.
Regardless of its relationship to Hepburn's real life, it has become kind of grafted onto her legend. She comes from New England out of nowhere, and she has delusions of grandeur, secretly harbors doubts. She does manage to get her way into a theatrical producer's office, and she starts chumming around with all these much more important people in the theater world, and they can't seem to get away from her. And even C. Aubrey Smith agrees, because he can't get a word in edgewise, basically, to be her acting teacher. And she is going on about all of her different opinions and her experience at the Little Theater in Franklin, Vermont, which she is both proud of and ashamed of.
But certainly from an intellectual standpoint, she is very intelligent. She knows all about modern theater. She has read the plays.
George Bernard Shaw.
She took German lessons from the local German mechanic or something. I can't remember.
So she's read
his profession, but he was working class.
She's read the Molnar play that everyone is excited about translating.
Molnar was, of course, multiply adapted at this time in the 30s.
He seems like probably Hollywood's idea of the most important playwright in the world in the 30s.
It's hard for me to understand what Broadway was like at this time, that there were just plays constantly being translated, hit plays that played all over the world, North America and Europe.
Yeah, well, we should read more 1930s New Yorkers. That would give us a perfect sense of what's going on.
Yeah, it was very international, and then these plays would also often end up being adapted for the films.
So the impresario that she is trying to impress is Adolphe Menjou. His fame has preceded her arrival in New York. She's been doing nothing but dreaming of meeting him and being in one of his shows and becoming his star.
Not just his star, but his muse, his artistic partner and companion, and they're going to each make each other the best that they can be. So we have this character who is extremely idealistic about art in this setting of this sad sack theater profession, Broadway specifically, profession, where it's really more of a business, like Hollywood. It's more of a business into which you try to squeeze a few drops of art.
And Menjou, he's certainly not presented as just a crass businessman. He is pretty dedicated to how are they going to work out the script, what are they going to do to streamline it or bring more excitement to it. He's not blasé about it.
But he knows that he needs a star, a personality who goes over with audiences in order to put it across.
And he has a close relationship with a playwright, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. They seem to be working together on a bunch of things, including the one that they are planning to cast at the moment when the movie starts. What was it called? Blue Skies?
Yeah, it had one of those generic Inland Empire play movie titles within a movie.
Yeah, we never see 1 second of the play. Thankfully, I'm not too interested, except in Stage Door of the Calla Lilies. That's always fun. But that actually is a line from The Lake, the play that Hepburn went back to Broadway to appear in and get shredded about. So we don't see what the play is. We don't have any real way to judge who's right for the part because we don't know anything about it. And we just have to go on what the film tells us, the kind of cues we get. Their star, Rita Vernon, is the character. Mary Duncan is the actress. They need her to play this central role, even though it's not a great role for her. But she's a great draw, and it will bring people in, and they'll enjoy all the rest of it.
Right, and the playwright is constantly getting upset because the material that he's worked on, whether he's the writer or the translator, is not going to be put across as intended. You see all of the roles of the star, especially in that final argument that they have, the star versus the producer versus the playwright.
Like from All About Eve.
All of the different stakes that are involved and who really has ownership of this enterprise. Yeah. Hint, it's not the writer on Broadway.
No, it's not the writer. There's a fairly lengthy exchange between Hepburn and Geneva Mitchell. She's playing an actress called Gwendolyn Hall. She is, I guess, the second lead or something. She's got an important part in the play, and she has a very catty relationship with Mary Duncan. They each call each other fat from the beginning.
Well, they said that Mary Duncan was going to play the heavy. I think they said that. Not in a weight sense.
But she's the most important role, female role, but she's not as sympathetic, I guess, as the male character. Whatever, we never see it. But she's the person on the marquee, and then lower down is Gwendolyn Hall. She kind of resents Rita, and they resent each other. And Gwendolyn Hall, though, the backstory to her is that she almost flamed out completely on booze, and Malju's giving her another chance. We think you can do a good job in this, but stay off the booze. I'm warning you.
She's an awful souse.
She says, don't worry, I learned my lesson. We never see any more of her at all, so...
Well, I think she has a few lines at the party, that's about it.
Yeah, who knows what happened with her, but hopefully she made good. Hepburn manages to weasel her way into a conversation with Malju and Fairbanks because...
Well, she's got nerve, as Malju says.
She sure does.
Yeah, despite her extreme nervousness and vulnerability, she nevertheless has the painful and awkward guts to get herself in the mix with these guys.
C. Aubrey Smith, he's sold. He's going to try to help her if he can, but of course he can't do much.
Everyone's charmed except Malju. He's not convinced.
Yeah, because Fairbanks really likes her right away.
And again, he is the business end of things, Malju. So he has to be thinking about what is best for this play commercially.
Yeah, as soon as she's not in the room anymore, he's like, she's some kind of nut. Forget about her.
And she really does come across as...
It's not just quirky eccentricity that you can... I mean, you really are afraid this is a person who's going to have a meltdown at any moment. And that's not something that just anyone can do.
Well, she's quixotic. She is delusional. That's the only way she's getting herself into these offices, something I could never have done. And most of us could not. One thing that I was thinking about while watching this is, if her trajectory is so unusual, how did these... Is there a class element here? How did these other actresses, how did they rise?
No, I think most of them went through vaudeville.
Exactly. Vaudeville and burlesque and...
So they're seasoned professionals. They're not just coming from Franklin, Vermont.
Follies and all of that sort of thing. And then you get your breaks and et cetera, et cetera. And there's an implication. Gwendolyn Hall gives an implication that there is also a casting couch. Yeah,
although Malju says that's not how things work in my shows. I do sleep with actresses, but I don't give them parts for it. But we'll talk a lot more about Malju's sexual behavior in this film. After all of that, she does leave an impression, enough of an impression that Fairbanks goes to bat for her and gets a little role for her. We find out. Now, we never see her play it, but we meet her several months later and she has failed in it. So they did cast her in Blue Skies.
Yeah, and it's very play-like structure in that is just all skipped over. Like it's obviously a several act structure to this film.
I love the scene where we're reintroduced to her after she's fallen on hard times in that cafe. She's just drinking this coffee. She's had no actual caloric intake maybe for days, sitting there all brittle, and C. Aubrey Smith notices her and comes in, and she puts on the brave face for him.
I thought this was interesting. It's quite believable that someone could intellectually understand a part and yet not have the experience to be able to put it across, even a very small part.
Sure, and this is dramatized, the way that could go wrong in Stage Door. And Hepburn was pretty brave, I think, to do all of that in Stage Door, to show how she failed exactly.
To give readings like a robot.
Yeah. I mean, to tell us a million times that the calla lilies are in bloom.
Right, but also in that film, she is arguing with the writers. So...
Yeah, well, presumably she was doing that in Blue Skies
so she's
as well.
Confident, and she might know what she's talking about, but she is not accessing the kind of extraordinary vulnerability that we see in this performance. So I don't know what the hell happened to Katharine Hepburn when she went on the stage. Probably just extraordinary nerves. Stage acting is not the same as screen acting.
It's not. And it's true that films were made at fairly breakneck speed in the early 30s, but still there's a lot more time to just calm down, reshoot it. There's no one watching in the audience. You can do it again, and you can zero in on her face, which you can't do on the stage. And I think that probably...
Yeah, voice acting is a whole other matter.
Her face is always vulnerable.
But her voice is always vulnerable, too.
Yeah.
So it's just a different art.
C. Aubrey Smith says, come with me. We're going to a party. It plays a success. We're in New York. So I guess she was in when they opened out of town and got kicked out immediately. Pretty much done nothing since except dwindle away her savings. So he takes her to the party with him. At first he just wants to drop her off at home, but she says she can't remember where she lives. Does she even have a place anymore?
She's obviously homeless. And C. Aubrey Smith knows that if he takes her to this party, he can at least feed her.
So that's what he does. And everyone at the beginning of this party, even Malju, comes across as pretty nice. Like, he realizes as well that She needs food. She needs someone to care about her at all. But, of course, he definitely doesn't live up to Good Samaritan.
Well, notably, he isn't making any passes at her. It's quite the other way around.
It's true, and we're going to need to talk about what happens between them at the end of the party, but we'll save that. At first, it's just kind of awkward. She is her usual defensive but sort of outgoing self. People are kind of walking away from her. You know, the people that are already on her side are looking out for her. They're getting her stuff, and they're trying to make her feel comfortable, as comfortable as she can.
She meets up with a critic and
a novelist,
right? The novelist is already extremely drunk. He's the one who convinces Mary Duncan that she needs to be getting a better salary and 50% of the profits.
That's true.
So he's out of his head drunk, and they all sit down together. This is the first thing that happens. The novelist says there's no attractive girls at this party, and then, quite contrary to her later established on-screen character, he decides that Katharine Hepburn is the most attractive girl at this party.
Yeah, well, she is. He also says there are no interesting people. She fits both of those. Now, he doesn't make passes at her, really, but he does...
No, that is his intention.
I guess, but it never gets anywhere. No, he gives her a lot of alcohol.
She starts throwing herself at Adolphe Menjou.
She only has eyes for Menjou. She whips herself up to that point. It's a long scene. She's just getting more and more comfortable. She's, like, slapping these guys on the back. She
starts smoking. But anyway, she's not used to drinking, or at least to champagne, so the same thing happens to her as happens to Soviet envoy Greta Garbo in Ninotchka. Plus, she hasn't eaten in a few days.
Yeah, it really goes to her head quickly.
And then we're off.
She saunters over to Menjou and sits in his lap for a while, tries to talk to him. She's not really getting anywhere with that, so then she gets up and starts to address the entire party.
She becomes belligerent.
You guys have been all ignoring me. I don't understand this. It can't go on.
Well, she's been wavering in her own mind, as she's told us and others several times, between thinking she's worthless and thinking she's great, and, now the alcohol has convinced her, has made her belligerent, and she's going to show them that she is in fact great.
Yeah, she says she's come back around to thinking of herself as great, and so she does some Shakespeare for them.
She does Hamlet, followed by Romeo and Juliet, and of course this is the sort of thing where, it actually really works that it's impossible to tell whether this is supposed to be good or not, because everyone who watches it isn't sure whether it's good or not.
I think the Romeo and Juliet is really good.
Alright.
That's the one that really impacts, because the Hamlet, some of them are paying attention and seem to be quite interested. Others think that it's ridiculous that she's delivering these lines in the middle of a stupid New York party. And she goes up on a balcony for the Juliet scene, right? She even does her own stage managing for herself at that point.
But anyway, she is being so extraordinarily obnoxious and vulnerable and ridiculous all at the same time that this is just like the longest cringe scene.
It is.
In movie history.
It's right up there with Curb Your Enthusiasm, except you actually care about this character, so it hurts a lot more when she embarrasses herself.
She sort of pulls it off, though.
Yeah, she does. And then she faints.
No, she passes out.
Well, whatever you want to call it. Alcohol poisoning gets the better of her.
Passes out in Adolphe Menjou's lap.
Yeah, and Menjou tells his manservant to take her up to bed. Fairbanks is like 100% convinced at this point. He tells Menjou, this is someone we really need to work with again and try to find a better situation for her to succeed in. And Menjou just says, a lot of these kids get drunk and show that they've got some kind of fire in them, but they're all just nuts. Forget about it. Then, of course, the next morning, did you expect this at all?
Well, as you say, it could kind of go either way.
Okay, so the next morning, it's a big scene again.
He doesn't seem like he's a sleaze, but...
It's really interesting. So he is hungover, he's sitting there, he seems clearly ashamed of himself.
I guess he's drunk too. What he has done, the best light to put on this is that what he has done is behaved caddishly by sleeping with a woman he's not interested in just because it's available.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, as long as she was conscious.
They were both conscious because she remembers all of it and she thinks that they are now like the hottest romance item in the world, right?
So at what time
all
of
it is clear to her.
At what time of night this happened or morning, we're not sure.
It seems like it may be more clear to her than to him. Now, I don't know how that actually works in terms of the science of booze, because she seemed like she would be out for 24 hours after that performance.
Unless she woke up and ate something.
We have to go with what the movie tells us. So he doesn't seem to have taken advantage of her that way. She was the initiator, I think. But if he had any sort of a decency. You would think he would have seen that this is going to mean a lot to her, so maybe I shouldn't do it if I'm not ready to ever see her again after having sex with her.
Right, and clearly the problem here is that she is just so incredibly intense that he can't deal with having any kind of relationship with her.
No, he doesn't have a relationship with anyone. If he just wants casual sex, you don't go to Eva Lovelace.
Lovelace, as she pronounces it, Loveless, as everybody else pronounces it.
That's right.
I had my pronunciation of that name corrected when I was about her age and about her position. Talking about Samuel Richardson's Clarissa. Thanks, George Tolles. I will never forget any of your pronunciation corrections.
The revelation of all of these doings, it comes to us through Malju telling Fairbanks that he wants him to be a go-between, take a letter up to her because he never wants to see her again.
And
he is ashamed of himself.
This is a pretty great performance. The way Adolphe Menjou does all of this. It is kind of like a comedy performance up there with Morocco.
I mean, Adolphe Menjou is a great actor.
He's just so... He underplays everything so much, and at the same time, he really conveys this character who was just uncomfortable the whole time.
Yeah, he will do the same kinds of things in Stage Door. He does make an invaluable contribution to Stage Door.
Yeah, he's very funny.
And, of course, Hollywood legend, it always comes up that he worked with Hepburn several times, and they were diametrically opposed politically, especially when they worked on State of the Union together after World War II. So there, the left versus right divide was much starker, and McCarthyism was about
and also Marlene Dietrich, famously a left liberal anti-Nazi.
Yeah, but I don't think she had public feuds with Menjou.
I don't know if I wouldn't know why she wouldn't, except that they only worked together that once.
Yeah, and that was the early 30s. Menjou, there weren't...
Yeah, the Nazi stuff hadn't quite heated up.
Yeah, and Menjou wasn't a Nazi. He was like a hardcore anti-communist.
I guess I'm getting confused because you have called him a fascist before.
Well, it's not technically
a term of endearment.
Correct. But State of the Union, it was legendary. Like, there were real problems on the set between them because that was the year, a crucial year in the American political system where Wallace...
What was Hepburn anti-blacklist?
Well, definitely, but the blacklist hadn't started yet. But 48 was the year that Wallace was running for the Democratic nomination, and that was basically like the Bernie of 1948. So she was about as far left as mainstream political thinking could go, and Menjou was, why isn't there a blacklist yet? Let's get everyone blacklisted. These commies are everywhere. So
now, the way she performs that scene where she's coming on to him while she's drunk, I don't think I can think of any other film that has a scene in it exactly like that, especially thinking what it would be like if Constance Bennett played it. You really believe that a young, starstruck girl would flirt with a mogul like this, a producer like this, in just exactly this way. It just feels so authentic.
It does.
It doesn't feel like a movie star playing this. It just seems like it's really happening.
Yeah, it's so upsetting to watch. Hepburn's heart is going to be broken. And of course, Fairbanks kind of takes it all in a joking stride until he realizes that he's actually talking about Eva. Presumably, he's seen this kind of behavior before from Menjou, and he doesn't shed too many tears over the other starlets that he slept with. And
well, he's not in love with them.
I think Fairbanks does a great job. You don't need chemistry with Hepburn anyway, so maybe you agree. But when he's talking to Menjou about Hepburn, I think it's very intensely believable that he is crushed.
Sure.
I don't think that he's upset at her or anything, right? He's just crushed that he knows this is going to really hurt her when she finds out that she slept with Menjou and she realizes what Menjou is like. Eventually she's going to have to find out.
He really didn't do that many swashbuckling roles other than Prisoner of Zende.
Not all kinds, but The Exile is a great one, the Ophuls movie, and Sinbad the Sailor is a really famous one.
Of course, he was in the atrocious Gunga Din.
Yeah.
But also the very good Dawn Patrol.
Yeah, Fairbanks has an interesting career. I love Angels Over Broadway. That's one of my very favorite films, the Ben Hecht directed film with Lee Garm. So he is entrusted with the task of bringing this message to her, this obviously awful letter that Menjou has written, and he never delivers it. He is overcome again by Hepburn's enthusiasm. She's so excited about what this all means, right? So she just comes down saying, I want to leave, I don't want to see him today, I just want us to savor these moments, and we're going to conquer the world together.
It skips over how she is ultimately let down?
Well, she never gets told anything. She just goes 5 months again without ever hearing from him. And always,
you'd think that this character would just show up at his apartment again.
He obviously avoids her no matter what she tries, and we see that now she's got no choice. She goes into really debased vaudeville acts. She's like a background person to some acrobats.
That's what I was going to say. Like, it's so painful to watch that scene, because of course we know that Katharine Hepburn herself is an acrobat and could be performing in this vaudeville routine, but not this character.
No, she's just there to gesture at them or something. Like, what a thankless role that is.
As the movie wraps up, though, the final stretch starts out looking like it's going to be very, very typical. Like, the movie has felt very atypical of this backstage drama, theater world sort of script. Now it seems like it's going to be the typical thing where
understudy takes over.
And it's a triumph.
Like 42nd Street.
Yeah, and a million other plays.
The Murnau play has been adapted, and again, we've been told from very early on, Hepburn wanted this role. She had read it in the original German. She could help with the translation, and she knows it front and back already. But Mary Duncan's character, the only reason she agreed to be in Blue Skies was that she wanted to call her shot for the next one. And she knows that there's this big cachet behind Murnau, and she wants to play it. Fairbanks is disgusted with this whole idea, but they have no choice. She has all the leverage, so they have to let her do it. And he's surprised to learn that she's actually good enough to do this, even though no one thought it was her kind of thing. But meanwhile, the business end of things...
She also tells him, you say that to me before every play.
Nobody seems concerned. Like, they do think it's going to be fine with her.
Yeah, again, their dynamic, though, is that he doesn't think she's good enough, and then she ends up coming through just enough. In fact, I actually really love that scene between her and Douglas Fairbanks.
She's terrific in that scene.
Where he's giving her notes, and she's either agreeing that that's a good idea, or disagreeing and saying you're full of crap, and he agrees. It shows that she may not be the most artistic actress, but she knows her stuff. She knows her stagecraft.
She is a star for a reason.
Yeah.
She knows it now, and she's got enough momentum going for her that she feels like this is the time to renegotiate her contract. 30 minutes before the curtain goes up.
Yeah, and she's probably right that she is being exploited.
Oh, I agree. From a workers' rights perspective, you have to side with her.
And of course, Katharine Hepburn is the scab.
She is. She goes to Maju and she says, you know why I've been so nice for the past 2 years? I mean, it's really pretty great. And they couldn't have just had anyone do this role. In a lot of these movies, the main star who gets replaced is just a total nobody who doesn't have...
I thought you were going to say is like a hideous heavy. And she's really not that in this film either.
They really needed someone who was a good actress in this role because they were going to give her this big scene at the end where she really puts the screws to Maju. And it works so well, and it kind of comes out of nowhere. Before that, she's mostly just doing kind of perfunctory stuff, fencing with her female rival and giving little kisses to Maju.
This is part of the film's message, which is that even when you are at the height of your stardom, you're in a profession where that may not give you any leverage, because everything is sort of luck of the draw.
So she wants 50% of the profits, which is the kind of thing workers should be asking for instead of just a salary while they get exploited. But Maju is like, this can't happen. He was going to have to agree to it, except that behind the scenes, because of this train wreck of a romantic past with Hepburn, he has not been informed that the understudy is Eva Lovelace.
Surprised that Mary Duncan didn't give this away.
Well, maybe she didn't know either.
That's a big moment in All About Eve, where Bette Davis has a tantrum and accuses everyone of hiding the fact that Eve is her understudy, and it's never actually resolved in the film whether they were deliberately hiding her or Davis was just paying no attention.
To me, it makes perfect sense that you would. If your star is at all given to paranoid thoughts, don't let them know anything about their understudy.
And as Bette Davis says in the film, paranoia? Me?
So they've got someone on site who can just jump in 30 minutes before the curtain goes up with no problems, and that's it. Mary Duncan is out. And hopefully she goes on to a Hollywood contract. That's what she says she's going to do. She's got a big enough name that Hollywood will welcome her with open arms, and you kind of get the sense that that's true. She's got a happy ending if that works out. And, of course, Eva Lovelace is getting the chance of a lifetime here, and it goes over big. The critic, who never stays for the third act, actually stays. I guess because you don't need to write about the end of a play, right? So why would you stay?
I guess if
You don't want to give away spoilers.
If you have
so...
many other engagements.
Or you just don't care and you want to go home. Anyway, that's this critic's modus operandi. Generally, he leaves after he's seen enough to write about. And that's it. He doesn't want to see the plays.
Don't editors always say they can tell from the first couple of paragraphs whether they're going to publish a book or not?
This one is so good that he is staying. Again, we don't see any of the actual play. At the end of the dressing room, we're told it's a huge success, and they give her the morning glory speech. Don't be a morning glory. Don't let this incredible feeling and moment be wasted. Don't throw it all away by overindulging or becoming an egotistical maniac. Or
like all of the other actresses we've seen.
All the other pitfalls that could come your way. Woman who works as the dresser is an old big-time star of the Bernhardt magnitude who has just not kept any money and is reduced to this. She has her last talk with Monjou, where she's still under the impression maybe now that they're kind of on almost equal footing here, they can go back to the romance. And he says, no.
Not interested.
No. This is a professional relationship. You're my biggest property now, so let's just focus on that.
Yeah, but that's not his real reason. He clearly has had sexual relationships with his stars.
Yeah, but not serious ones, right? I mean...
Well, exactly. So the problem is still that he doesn't want to get entangled.
Exactly. She is not...
Peppy is the boyfriend of Mary Duncan.
She still likes Monjou.
Even as she continues to flirt with Monjou, she obviously has all of these other relationships going on, so she is not hung up on him.
No, and that's how he likes it. That's all settled, but of course settled to his satisfaction, not hers. She is crushed all over again. I guess she was really thinking, if I could prove my mettle as an actress, then he'll really love me. But
sure.
No, that doesn't help. Fairbanks comes in the course of their discussion. It comes out that he loves her. She hasn't noticed. She should have noticed long ago.
But she's caught off guard by this, not immediately able to respond.
And he says, no, you're right. This was not the right time for me to tell you this. And they have a little kiss and he goes away.
At the point at which she's actually saying to the dresser, success is so empty, I was cringing a little at the conventional melodrama, but then it saves itself at the end there by rising to this insane lyrical pitch and then just ending on... So this is the curtain closer line, I guess.
Yes.
Just ending on that note of hysteria.
Absolutely amazing. Great final scene.
Yeah, and you don't see movies end that way very much. Or even plays.
No, never. This is a really demented movie.
Early Katharine Hepburn had a raw talent that was like punk rock raw.
Yes, absolutely.
And it has nothing to do with technique.
See it most clearly probably in this film and Christopher Strong.
Yeah, probably.
All right, I guess that's Morning Glory.
It is. Watch it and then you'll know what we're talking about.
Onward to Our Betters.
So, the play in this instance was written by Somerset Maugham.
That's right.
Incredibly prolific English author. Other personnel who adapted it are interesting. So, Harry Wagstaff Gribble.
Good name.
Who does not have a Wikipedia entry. I thought for certain this had to be somebody's pseudonym, and this was just like a made-up person, but no, it is a real person, an English playwright and director and actor and screenwriter.
Oh, okay.
His screenplay credits include Stella Dallas and Bill of Divorcement.
Really?
Yes, indeed. Even more interesting, perhaps, is Jane Murfin.
Oh, yes, I know her well.
So, her screenplay credits include Smilin' Through, although that's a 1919 version. Other Hepburn RKOs that you like, such as The Little Minister and Spitfire.
I love those.
But also Alice Adams. Also The Women, and I think you can feel that already in this screenplay. And Pride and Prejudice, which you like.
She co-wrote it with Aldous Huxley.
But what was Smilin' Through again?
I love Smilin' Through.
But obviously it's not the 1919 version.
The 32 version and the 41 version actually is probably my favorite. That's the one that's directed by Borzage.
Okay. So it was a 1919 play by Jane Cowell and Jane Murfin.
Oh, okay.
That was then made into several adaptations. Who else do we want to talk about? In the key comedy role of the Duchess Minnie, there's Violet Kemble Cooper.
Is she from the play? play?
I don't know. Her Wikipedia entry doesn't mention it.
Feels like someone who was indispensable from the actual play. I don't know.
So she was an English-American actress, and she was also in David Copperfield, but it's not an extensive Wikipedia entry, unfortunately. And then some other people we may talk about. We can already mention Anita Louise has a very thankless role and is styled very unflatteringly.
Still looks good. And she would become Warner Brothers' glamour actress in the second half of the 30s. If you think that that's kind of a thankless sounding role, well, it was.
Because Warner Brothers wasn't all about the glamour?
No. But she was the one that they always turned to when they needed someone who was supposed to look like an MGM movie star. That would be the Anita Louise role. You know her best, I think, from Love Letters. Her small role in Love Letters. That's where you always recognize her from.
Yeah, she looks great in Love Letters, but she plays the fiancé who doesn't get it.
Right.
But the most generous version of that role I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's a very sympathetic role, even though she gets written out right after it. And Gilbert Roland.
Gilbert Roland as the more important Peppy.
He comes out of nowhere in this movie. Now, if you recognize him as Gilbert Roland, which I did, he's one of my favorite Hollywood actors, really. He had a really, really long career, and it was kind of a slow burn. He started to get starring-ish roles in the 50s.
He was Mexican-born.
He was married to Constance Bennett, wasn't he?
Was he?
At some point he was. Probably not here, but maybe this is where they first met.
Oh yeah, it says right here in his entry, married actress Constance Bennett in 1941.
Oh, 8 years later. So he built up to starring roles in the 50s and to a marriage with Constance Bennett in the 40s. I don't think it lasted very long.
He came from a line of bullfighters.
Oh, really?
Yes. He is hilarious.
Yeah, he's so good.
Yeah. The way I want to frame this discussion is by talking about I'm going to use Emmanuel Levy, the wonderful critic blogger who often writes entries on even rather obscure studio era films.
This is someone you've read before?
I've come across his blog before. I may even have brought it up on the podcast before.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about him.
He's a critic, professor, and author. I take issue with the way that he characterizes this movie. Yeah, I'm using him as a fall guy.
Okay.
Which isn't very fair, but you're going to get your opinions out there, you might become somebody's springboard.
Any publicity is good publicity.
Hopefully he agrees. What he basically says is that this was an attempt by Cukor to do British high comedy, and that it fails because most of the actors, other than Violet Campbell Cooper, do not have the technique required for it. Number one, forgive me if I missed something, but are not most of the, if not all of the characters Americans?
Most of them, yeah. Not the princess and not the duchess.
So it was a play authored by a British playwright, but the key comedy characters are Americans.
Yeah.
So Duchess Minnie is not. She is, in fact, British?
Yeah, she's British. She's the duchess. She's not like someone that married into it. She's the actual duchess.
And so the man she married was an American millionaire then? Because that's how everybody is paired up.
I think she had other husbands.
Other husbands. So she's like a serial marrier?
She had Gaston, too. Like a penniless French guy, right?
But anyway, Constance Bennett is American. Peppy is Spanish-Mexican?
I guess, yeah.
Then there's another transplanted American.
Grant Mitchell's character, who has been there a long time. He's sort of a Clifton Webb kind of character in The Razor's Edge. Just like a social facilitator.
Yeah, not everybody is supposed to be British, for one thing. The role was originated on the stage, or played on the stage, famously by Ina Claire.
Okay,
so
friend of the show.
If you're saying that she is an example of how to properly play British high comedy like this, and Constance Bennett is not, that's kind of funny, because Ina Claire came up through vaudeville.
Yeah.
Although she became associated with playing...
She was a musical comedy
high
star.
Comedy. Constance Bennett actually came from a family of thespians who were a wealthy family.
Yes.
So, who is actually better suited to play this type of role? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think any of that makes sense. I think it's more important to look at what's actually on the screen. Yeah, to me, I think it works. I don't think it's a great film, but I really enjoyed it.
Ina Claire, we recently talked about her key role in Ninotchka. She's brilliant in that. And she also plays the extremely different role on screen of Claudia's mother in the Dorothy McGuire film that we will do in some context, or more than one at some point.
I think she's in The Greeks Had a Word for It, too.
Is she? She had an extensive career. This film, I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was quite good. It is distinctly a Cukor pre-code, Cukor's version of a pre-code.
There's very flagrant
so is
sex in it.
Dinner at 8, but I actually prefer this.
Well, I saw Dinner at 8 on the big screen a couple of years ago, and it rose in my estimation.
Yeah.
It
can feel stilted, and one thing you can say about this film, and the reason it kind of goes off like a shot, like a pre-code, is that it doesn't feel stilted, however else you feel about it.
No, Constance Bennett is really in control of it.
And it is certainly a dry run for the women, and of course neither of us are big fans of that movie.
No, but this is so much better than the women, I think. Just the plot is, anyway.
The pre-codious thing about it is that it is blatantly evident in this film, to me at any rate, that all of the women are just gay men in drag. And that makes sense because Somerset Maugham was also gay.
Yes, he was.
And apparently, according to Emmanuel Levy, he and Cukor were lifelong friends.
What are your grounds for saying that?
Their sex lives.
Okay.
Which would be very familiar to closeted gay men of the era. And their over-the-top, bitchy-mannered way of interacting with each other. And then the monkey wrench at the end that makes everything completely impossible to read, which is the appearance of an actual flamboyantly gay man, who I'll just name him here.
The dance instructor.
Tyrell Davis, who must have done this kind of role a lot because he appeared in movies with titles such as Mother's Boy, Strictly Unconventional, and Let Us Be Gay. If you see him in this film, that is over the top, in your face. Apparently, again, according to Levy, although he doesn't say who it was, this appearance was noted by critics at the time as
pretty...
What the hell?
It's amazing.
It's a pre-code.
He's pretty fun. Yeah, I mean, he comes in...
He's amazing.
He has...
And he renders, like, everything I was saying about these women actually being gay men, he renders it totally unreadable, and the sexual stuff unreadable, and everything. It's just a complete blowing up in your face of signifiers.
So let's look at how the plot sets itself up. We need Constance Bennett to become this cynical demi-mondaine type, and she's not originally. We meet her on her wedding day. She is so excited. She's married someone with an important title.
She's a lady.
It's Alan Mowbray, who is a great character actor who turns up for many decades to come. Maybe one of his most famous roles is in My Man Godfrey. He is Godfrey's old pal from Harvard. In this one, we meet them driving home after the ceremony, and he says...
Well, it's the same setup transplanted to America and England as Rules of the Game. That's how she becomes the heroine. Her name is escaping me at this moment, but she becomes disillusioned when she realizes that her husband is continuing his affair.
Yeah, it's true.
And always intended to continue his affair.
The classic title marries American money plot.
A lot of Henry James points come up in this film.
It does feel very Jamesian, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, I mean, not in the dialogue, but in everything else.
Yeah, in the emotional turmoil.
Oh, yeah, and the fact that everybody's at a country house having affairs with each other, as the American sort of Puritan stick-in-the-mud comments at one point.
Yeah.
They're all hiding some terrible secret.
But there's also the princess, Stick in the Mud, who also is a champion of monogamy. She's the one that he has the talk with at one point.
Oh, yeah, okay. She didn't register.
You're different.
She didn't register much for me.
She's there just to be the
Talked
one
at.
British woman who doesn't act like the rest of her friends.
Right.
It also kind of feels a tiny bit like the saga of Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles.
Yeah, except that
right?
Diana had a breakdown. Maybe Constance Bennett is heading for a breakdown.
Well, she seems to be handling it pretty well. It's a real intense blow to her right in the first few minutes. She is primping in front of the mirror. She's being congratulated by everybody, including her adoring younger sister, Anita Louise. And she goes to see her husband. She is treated to the spectacle of him pledging his eternal devotion to this woman that he can't marry because she has no money.
Well, this is the only thing that keeps her from being a villain, because she acts very heartless, except toward the end, for the rest of the film.
Well, I don't know. Does she really act heartless? Who is she hurting?
Cynical.
Yeah, definitely cynical.
Like she has no heart of her own to be invested in
right.
anything.
She's not malicious.
Well, as her speech toward the end makes plain, the whole point of this is that she is now an American in England. She is having nothing to do with her husband, and she has to, in order to be accepted in their society, she has to have some kind of social attraction, and she has to have a social circle that is loyal to her, that she maintains. Yeah, well, that's it basically, but their only bonds are what they can get out of each other, and the fact that she is amusing them all. And if she screws anybody over, then she is actually in a socially vulnerable position. And she also has to keep scandal from accruing to her, because that will mean that people will stay away from her and she'll just be this pariah. A married woman who is separated from her husband and is therefore a pariah.
It's a very tenuous situation for her. It's not just the fact that she realizes on the day of her wedding that her husband never had any intention of having a romantic relationship with her. It's always been this other woman. He also takes her inheritance, her American commercial inheritance, and just spends it all. So she has no money left either.
So she needs to be financed by
another rich American.
Another man who, it's kind of kept ambiguous whether they're sleeping together or not, but they presumably in real life would have to be.
Yeah, they're sleeping together, but that first scene when he appears, I really didn't understand for the first few minutes whether it was her dad.
Yeah, totally.
Which is amazing, and it's clearly shot that way so that the audience is not clear whether this is a sexual relationship or not.
Calling her girly?
By the end of the scene, it's very clear that, yes, he is her main romantic partner.
And who is he? Which one is he?
Minor Watson is the actor.
Yeah, so he presumably is another American.
Rich Dodsworth kind of guy. He's got millions,
Girly.
so he's much richer than her family
We learned
was.
that she only had 1 million.
Yeah, it's nothing. And it's gone.
It's
gone. He lost it all in Monte Carlo.
Yeah, so he was just marrying her for some gambling money, actually, not even to permanently finance himself.
Not really. He doesn't seem to have been a very far-sighted, titled character, and we never see him again. Minor Watson basically stands in for something like a husband in the scenes at her house, and she is not interested in being faithful exclusively to him either, and why should she be? He is an old galoot, seems nice enough, but in a kind of fatherly way.
So by heartless, I guess what I'm saying is that, yes, she has no emotional investment in anyone around her. They're just necessary for her mere social survival.
But she does care
and financial survival.
A great deal about her sister.
Anita Louise.
And that is the heart of the film, right? So that's where the...
Yeah, but I can't say I cared.
You didn't. I
didn't care at all.
Oh, well, I think that
I didn't need to hear Anita Louise's lecture.
No, it's not the lecture, because you don't agree with Anita Louise, but you feel bad that Constance Bennett has to hear that, has to deal with that from the only person that she still cares about.
It was being set up as a sort of Little Foxes thing.
Yeah.
Teresa Wright and Little Foxes, but Regina Giddens actually doesn't care. I mean, you can see it hurts her a little as her daughter walks out on her, but more because she hasn't gotten her way than anything else. Whereas this character actually still is capable of having feelings for her family.
Nobody should be taking seriously Anita Louise's actual puritanical attitude towards things, but it doesn't really matter whether the person is right or not. If you have disappointed them monumentally and they don't like you anymore and they're the only person that you still feel like you have a connection to, that's bad.
It's also set up a little bit like Max Ophuls' Caught as a cautionary tale, but for who? For rich Americans who might want to marry title guys? Well, it is set up that way, for sure, but I mean, yeah, it's not exactly relatable.
No, because if you're watching it as an audience member, you're thinking, well, Constance Bennett looks like she's having a lot more fun. And it's true, everything is very tenuous and could fall apart at any moment. But if you're on top of things the way she is, and even better if her sister's back in America now, then she doesn't have to worry about that anymore.
I don't know. I don't agree to you that she's having fun. I mean, she's making the best of a terrible situation.
Yeah, that's true.
She has to be this stage manager all of the time.
Yeah, but it's incredible to watch. It's a great performance. So most of the fun of the film is watching her play six-dimensional chess with everybody. Even things that don't seem like they're going to matter. And of course she is financing all of these parties and invitations with money she's getting from Minor Watson. And to keep all the plates spinning and everyone happy, she has to keep bringing new and interesting oddballs into the mix, like the character, the dance instructor.
Including flamboyant homosexuals who are very entertaining in this context. So you're saying that Ernest, played by Tyrell Davis, the dance instructor, you're saying that this is the guy she's been trying to get the whole time.
Because he's very amusing and all the rich ladies want to take dancing lessons from him. And you see that it pays off because the Duchess is planning to leave and spread scandal all over London until he shows up at the exact right moment.
I wonder if this flamboyant portrayal was a coup of the stage play as well. You could also play this guy as Lothario, but I don't think it would have the same impact
No,
as playing him as an anti-Lothario, and yet completely believable that this type of woman would fawn over a flamboyant gay guy like this.
yeah.
And he would exactly serve this kind of social role.
He knows his business. And he's a stern
He has
taskmaster.
he has to scold her and scold her.
If you put your foot that way again, I'm going to kick it.
Oh, he's amazing.
It focuses in on characters that don't normally get this kind of careful attention, like Gilbert Roland's Gigolo, Peppy. There are many movies from this era that have a gigolo in them, but none of them give that character this much to say and this much
even though he says
agency.
it very tersely. Let's focus in on the plot, the crux of the plot, which is this sort of triangle.
I guess you could call it a triangle.
It's a triangle of sorts.
It's a triangle where only one person really cares about anything, and she's an idiot.
None of them care about anything.
No, the Duchess really cares.
She's not in love with him, though.
I guess she is, as much as she can be. By the end, she's willing to marry him.
She's lonely. She talks about how lonely she is.
Okay,
so she actually has a little moment of pathos.
Yeah, exactly.
But mostly she's getting some kind of sexual satisfaction out of it, even though it doesn't look like they're having that much sex. But it's more her libido that's at stake than anything here. And her loneliness, yes.
I guess. I'm just saying that she's the only one for whom the object of her affection is actually important. For the other two, it's just like they're happy with whatever. She really is fixated on Peppy.
And this does seem, if you have done any reading about the kind of relationships that gay men were forced into at the time, because they had to keep it all hidden and because they had to hire men like prostitutes or take them on as kept men, often men of the lower class, that these are the sorts of relationships and the sorts of emotional conundrums that they would get into.
The Duchess has Peppy, and Peppy is very much in it for the paycheck. He is not attracted to the Duchess. Doesn't really even pretend to be.
He's trying to maneuver things so that she'll marry him and
settle some money on him.
At least settle some money on him. He's hoping, obviously, for more, like he would get actual legal access to her funds, but that's
not going to happen.
She is playing it safe. She's not going to get too carried away here.
Yeah, so the big aim of her life is to get Peppy something to do all day so that he doesn't get into little affairs with shop girls and whoever else he comes across. So she comes to Constance Bennett and says, "Help me get this guy a job." What can he do? Well,
nothing.
Apparently nothing, so he's perfect for the diplomatic corps.
Yeah, that's a little comic exchange that they have.
By the end of the movie, Bennett has succeeded. Her character's name is Pearl, and she has succeeded in getting Peppy a job, but maybe too late, because he won't need a job anymore now that he's got the settlement.
He obviously doesn't want a job. Who does?
No, I don't want a job.
He's so independent. Says Duchess Minnie.
It doesn't matter whether you work for it or not, it's just having the money. He takes on the quest of sleeping with Pearl more as a challenge than anything else. Obviously, she's very attractive as well, but it seems more like he just wants to see what he can get away with.
Sure.
And it's the same for her. She's not particularly madly in love with Peppy, but he is good looking.
Yeah, she does have her little moment of passion that makes her do this against her better judgment. And, because they're right in front of everybody during this country house weekend, this sacred fount weekend.
And when they're discovered, that's probably the best laugh in the whole movie, where she just turns to him and says, "I told you it was too obvious," or whatever.
Like completely indifferently.
So good. Yeah. So good.
At the end of that cards scene, during which...
That felt like a really Henry James kind of setup.
During which Minnie has her whole fit.
Yeah, the Duchess Minnie wants to expose this...
Actually, most of her fit is just relayed to us in the next act.
Yeah, but she sees that they're both going into this little shack on the property, and she knows what's going to be happening there. She can't go down and expose them.
No one is ever caught in a Henry James.
No, but
it's all about epistemology.
But it feels like a stratagem that would emerge in a Henry James type scenario, where she needs the voice of innocence to find them, right? It becomes like what Bessie knew.
Yeah, because why does she do this?
Because it's...
just in order to destroy Constance Bennett.
And because...
Which does suggest that she does have something resembling some kind of feeling for her gigolo, because otherwise, why would she try to hurt Constance Bennett this way?
Yeah, she is fixated.
They are actually friends enough the
well,
Duchess...
they're best friends.
Yeah, the Duchess and the lady are actually friends enough that they would know how to hurt each other.
Yeah, so Anita Louise is the way to get at her.
Oh, the more Jamesian part was how she figures out that they are an item, which is that Constance Bennett makes a joke about it, right? About having a rendezvous with Pepe, that everybody laughs their heads off about. But then later when Pepe happens to mention going
to the museum
as well, which no one would expect him to be there, that's when Minnie puts it together.
Yes.
And then she just needs proof.
She needs for it to come out in the most embarrassing way possible to the guilty parties.
The turn of the screw that The Sacred Fount adds to this type of story, Henry James's novel, is that it's not just discovering who's having an affair, because everybody already knows who's having affairs. It's that the narrator decides that even the affairs themselves are smokescreens for other affairs.
Yes. Some of that is in this one as well, right?
And you're right, actually, in The Wings of the Dove, Lord Mark does break the news to... Yeah, but nobody's actually caught in that.
Right.
Nobody's ever actually caught in Henry James. In the act.
No, not in the act.
What act they are doing with all of those evening clothes on that only takes 15 minutes in that summer house or whatever it is, I'm not sure.
Well, who knows? But Anita Louise sees something pretty damning through the window, and that's all we know about it.
But what were you saying about relationships in this movie being smokescreens for smokescreens, or?
Constance Bennett even draws attention to this fact that if the Duchess is unhappy with her and wants to show someone evidence of infidelity on Pearl's part, she shouldn't be trying to wreck things with Minor Watson's character, the American industrialist. She should be trying to publish this for the perusal of Ellen Mowbray's character, who's off somewhere doing something and we never find out about.
There are no financial stakes there.
Multiple levels of infidelity.
The thing that, for me, makes this so much more fun and punk rock than The Women is that The Women... The play, or at least as it is adapted, has such a conservative vibe to it.
Yeah.
And this film has no allusions about sex at all.
Yeah, the real problem with The Women...
Or marriage, or anything else.
Because there are a lot of amusing things in The Women, but what sinks the whole movie for me, in general, is that it presents Stephen as a valuable commodity, and that is...
The off-screen husband?
Ridiculous.
Who's having an affair, yeah.
The rest of it I can totally get on board with, and I guess the people that love it are just saying, that's just something that
Well, the people who love it should embrace this film instead.
They should, but it doesn't have as many famous actors in it. Famous female actors in it.
That's true.
People love The Women, but I don't think anyone agrees with its premise that Norma Shearer should want Stephen back. But you kind of have to if you're trying to go with it. If you're trying to go with the momentum of the film, you're supposed to feel something when she actually wins him back, and that is
the real problem,
a hard thing to do.
Is that she is an idiot.
She is, yeah.
And the rest of the women are way better than she is, more interesting and fun, which, this is kind of like having that movie, but with no Norma Shearer character.
That's right, which is better. And I love Norma Shearer, but that's not a good role for her.
Well, it actually was a good role for her, in terms of box office.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It was a better role for Joan Crawford, though.
Analog, I guess, to the Norma Shearer character in this one, sort of Anita Louise, but even more, it's the Charles Starrett character, because he comes over from America. He's the childhood love of Anita Louise, and they were engaged.
I found him very annoying, too.
Well, that's why he's the analog. But he actually has several speeches about what he wants and how he thinks people should behave, whereas Anita Louise, it's just kind of, we know by inference that that's how she feels about things, because she's so scandalized by everything.
Oh, and she's just totally manipulated by everybody, by her sister, by both guys who want to marry her, by Minnie.
Yeah, she has a tough time in this film. If you want to, though, you could feel like, Charles Starrett is speaking up for your version of good, clean American values.
Yeah, but those guys, the good, clean American values guys, are almost entirely kept off screen, which is the way it should be.
Yeah. I don't know if there's that much more to say about this.
Well, okay, so after the big blow up, of course, what happens is that, for reasons we've already given, Lady Greyston has to do damage control.
So incredibly, just masterfully orchestrated. She doesn't even break
a sweat as she's doing all of this.
She just stays in bed all morning and lets her machinations machinations play out.
Which is part of what horrifies her sister.
Yes.
That she can not only do this scandalous thing, have this affair on top of an affair.
And then she sleeps the sleep of the just right afterwards.
And then feels pretty confident that she can fix all of this.
Well, she makes a few phone calls before going to bed to take the cars out of commission so that no one can leave. It's you're all trapped on the estate until I resolve it with a dance instructor, Deus Ex Machina. And that's basically how it works out, because as long as everyone stays for the full term of the weekend, then even if they change their mind later, the Duchess decides, no, I still want to tell the press about this. Well, who's going to believe it? Because there would have been a blow-up and everyone would have left. If the party stays together, then that means nothing really happened.
One thing I can probably imagine is not based on who is better suited to the role, but if Ina Claire was already as good in 1933 as she was in Ninotchka, that she could be...
She was a big star from the teens onward, I think.
She could be very, very cutting in this role in a way that, like, beyond what Constance Bennett is currently capable of.
The way it's filmed, I don't think that they're asking her to be particularly cutting, just cunning.
Sure. Well, they do want her to be sympathetic.
Yeah, exactly. And the Minor Watson attitude, I guess, is a sort of compromise, right? Where he comes back and he's like, all right, well, you're sleeping with Peppy sometimes. Just don't let me find out about it anymore. We can keep going as we have been.
But
because
you
need my money.
As you say, it's almost the thrill of doing this under everybody's noses that is the whole reason for them doing it, because they're otherwise very bored with their lives.
Yeah, so that may be tough.
They are both kept people. They are the kept people.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if she is supposed to be friends with the Duchess, best friends with the Duchess, they are not on an equivalent level.
And that too feels very Jamesian, because he likes to focus in on those characters that have constraints upon them.
Yeah, like the Golden Bowl.
Yeah. Do we have more that we need to say about our betters?
I thought it was pulled off pretty darn successfully, this type of comedy, which, again, it's not exactly British high comedy. For one thing, it's way smuttier. For another thing, again, it's more international. The international Henry James set.
No, because British high comedy would it have this traumatized consciousness of Anita Louise involved in it at all? Why?
No, but that may have been something inserted for the film.
I don't know. It feels pretty integral.
Yeah, I mean...
It's part of why I like it. Not because of that character being admirable in herself, but the pull that she has upon Constance Bennett's character really gives everything stakes that it wouldn't have otherwise.
Well, yeah, it is more like a...
Because Henry James plots could be high comedy too, but they're not.
Well, they are, though. They are considered often from the angle of comedy of manners.
Right, but they also have deeply impactful psychological outcomes.
Yeah, so this sexual misbehavior has this dark consequence, but everything around it is this kind of brittle comedy.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's not the same thing as...
That's not Noel Coward.
It's not... Well, that's exactly who Emmanuel Levy compares.
Right, it's not the same kind of story at all.
Although it does say
superficially similar.
This is darker material. It's not Noel Coward, and it's also not, like, The Importance of Being Earnest.
But it is good, and you should watch it.
Yeah, so whether you want to take it as an analog for... I think you can do both. As a commentary on the international jet set, and the types of roles that gay men had to play in it. The movie explicitly comments on that. Or you want to take it as the women type analog for gay male sexuality at the time, just like in Proust. Proust, of course, famously transposed the gay relationships he was aware of, and some that he took part in, transposed those to heterosexual relationships and remembrance of things past.
Yeah.
You can take it both ways, and it's still good.
Another early Cukor, worthwhile for auteurs out there, and see Connie Bennett at her zenith as the highest paid actress in Hollywood.
So what are we doing next week?
Next week is going to be an extravaganza. Try to put aside some extra time, people, because it might be a really long one. I guess we'll find out. We're going to be doing our September special subject, the incredible collaboration of Frank Capra and Barbara Stanwyck. 5 big features will be covered.
So I'm guessing this is going to be a long recording next week.
So we're going to have to watch the movies over 2 nights and then do the recording. So
Yikes.
be there with us and be ready to enjoy Forbidden, Ladies of Leisure, Miracle Woman, Bitter Tea of General Yen, and Meet John Doe 8 years later.
Oh yeah, you can't miss watching all of those. And you should be able to find them all.
Mostly, and if you can't, just let us know and we will point you in the right direction.
All right.
See you then.